Good evening, and today I want to talk about finding your car is not really a map problem. It is an orientation problem. A map can tell you where the car is, but when you are standing in an underground parking garage surrounded by the similar cars, pillars, lines, signs, and floor numbers, knowing the location is only half of the jobs. The harder question is much more physical. Which way should I walk? That is why I find this small Tesla app detail interesting. It doesn't ask the user to open a map, rotate the view, compare landmarks, and decode a 2D layout. It simply gives a directional cue. A small arrow turns location into movement. And that is the difference between the showing information and giving guidance. In this video, I want to break down two ideas. First, why finding a car is an orientation problem. And second is how a small arrow turns location into direction. When people talk about finding a car, they usually think about maps. They make sense on the surface. The car has a location. The phone has a location. So the app should show a map. But this logic misses the real user problem. In a parking garage, the user is not looking at the world from above. The user is standing inside the space. They see cars, pillars, lines, and etc. Everything looks familiar. Everything repeats. And the user has to connect a small digital view on the phone with a messy physical environment in front of them. That translation is the hard part. A 2D map gives information, but it still asks the users to do a mental work. The user has to rotate the map in their head, compare landmarks, and guess which direction they're facing, and then decide where to walk. That's a lot of cognitive load for a moment when the users are already confused. This is the design mistake many interfaces makes, and they give user more information, but they do not reduce the interpretation cost. And in this scenario, interpretation cost matters more than information volume. The users doesn't need a beautiful map first. The user needs orientations. They need a simple answer. Where should my body move next? That is why this line is important. The problem is not where the car is. It is which way I should go. The small distinction changes the design goal. If the goal is location, you build a map. If the map is orientation, you give direction. And in a parking garage, direction is often more valuable than details. Well, now look at this detail in the Tesla app. You can see the right pictures. That's my Tesla, and next to the location rule, there's a small arrow. It is easy to ignore, but from a UX perspective, it does a lot of work. The arrow doesn't explain the parking garage. It tells the user what to do next. Without this cue, the user has to enter a heavier floor, open the map, and wait for it to load, zoom in, rotate the view, compare the phone with the real environment, and then decide where to walk. That flow may be accurate, but it is mentally expensive. Tesla reduces the process into one immediate signal. Go this way. This is why the arrow is useful. It turns an abstract location into a physical direction. Location is information. Direction is action. Good user experience design is not always about adding more detail. Sometimes it is about removing the needs to interpret details. A map can be useful when the user needs full spatial understanding, but in this specific moment, the user may not need full understanding. They just need the first correct movement. This is why putting the cue on the main vehicle screen makes sense. The user opens the app and immediately gets a sense of the direction. No extra more, no extra decision, no full navigation task. That is low friction design. When someone is lost in a parking garage, every extra tap feels heavier. Every extra screen creates delay. Every extra piece of information asks the user to think. A good cue cuts through that. It doesn't say, here's everything you might need. It says, start here. That is why this line works. A good cue makes the next action obvious. The arrow is not just an icon. It is a shortcut from confusion to movement. For automotive UX design, this is a useful design principle. Do not just show user where things are. Help them understand what to do next. That is the difference between the information and guided, and sometimes one small arrow is enough to make that difference clear.